Well, thank you everyone for joining. We're so excited to co-host this presentation today. I'm Katie Holdberg. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Casa Dorinda, and we're so excited to welcome our Casa Dorinda residents, waitlist members, board members, members of the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and we're just so thrilled to have partnered and co-hosted this event in partnership with the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden and bring you this discussion today about Anna Dorinda Bliss and the founding mothers that came together to create the beautiful gardens that we know today. So I just want to take a moment and introduce Dr. Steve Windhager, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, who I think a lot of you know and love. Steve is a national leader in sustainable development and ecological restoration and became the garden's Executive Director in 2010. He completed his PhD work in environmental science, focusing on restoration ecology of prairie systems, and he studied and practiced of restoring damaged ecosystems from both a Steve, help me out here. Philosophical, thank you, and applied angled, and he has come to celebrate the regional vernacular of gardening with plants native to wherever he has lived. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Steve. So Steve, thank you so much again.
Well, thank you all for having me today. I very much appreciate it. First off, I have to say, I'm so excited to be giving this talk. This is to be talking about the incredible women that have built the garden over time is an incredible honor because the truth is the garden has a long history of some amazing women doing some amazing work. And so it's really an honor for me to be able to share this during Women's History Month, as well as on the garden's 95th birthday. So, for many of you, I want to say thank you for helping us celebrate the garden's birthday. And we'll start kicking it off right now. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk about her story in the history of the Botanic Garden. And first off, though, I was hoping to do a survey, but I'm not sure this will be easily possible right now. But just as a quick show of hands, how many folks, or do a little celebratory thing with your controllers, make a reaction. How many people have actually been to the Botanic Garden in the last year, or maybe the last 2 years? Good, good. All right. So actually, more than despite the pandemic, we've seen a lot of folks coming by. That's fantastic. All right. So let me go ahead and we'll go ahead and get started. So for most of you already know that the garden is 100% California native plants, and we've been that way since our founding in 1926 as part of the Museum of Natural History here in Santa Barbara. Actually, at that time, we were part of the Museum of Oology, which, as everyone knows, is the study of bird eggs. So we were originally part of the outbreak of that. Of course, the landscape and plants are so important to birds. It was natural for the museum to want to also found a botanic garden. We were the first botanic garden in the nation that focused exclusively on native plants. And that's been our claim to fame. We're now a living museum and been a member of the American Alliance for Museums since 1996, with more than 78 acres and over 1,000 taxa of California native plants represented here in the garden. I want to start to talk about the women that really preceded the garden, honestly, that made it possible for the garden to do what it's done today. One of the first early botanists in California was Catherine Brandigee. And Catherine was one of the first 3 women to enroll at the University of California Medical School in 1875, pursuing botany. And of course, the University of California is Berkeley Medical School. And at that time, you could not get a degree in medicine without understanding botany. And that really became her focus as she went through that degree. In 1883, she became the curator of botany for the California Academy of Science and was the first woman in California to hold a major position within the university, within a museum. She conducted the first botanical collecting trips in northern Baja in 1893 and built her own herbarium and botanic garden in San Diego area. After the 1906 earthquake destroyed much of the holdings of the California Academy of Science, as well as the other herbariums in the Bay Area, she actually donated her entire personal herbarium back to California, UC Berkeley, and their herbarium. And that was 76,000 specimens back in 1907. So that's an incredible wealth of understanding of California that it was preserved because of her hard work. Also, Blanche Trask was one of the other botanists that we really want to mention. Blanche was not just an incredible botanist, but she was also really an explorer. So her focus was the Channel Islands, and she went through and did some of the first collecting trips in San Clemente, San Nicolas, Santa Rosa, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. So really all of the southern, California Channel Islands. And because of her, she found a whole bunch of new species. And there are a number of those species that bear her name as part of their species nomenclature.
Carpus, circle part.
All right, it looks like I need to turn some, everybody may want to mute themselves real quick as we go through this. All right, so the next person I want to talk about was Alice Eastwood. Alice was another powerhouse and largely self-taught. She did not go to college, but she read every available botany manual she could find. She grew up in Colorado and was already a guide for many of the other botanical explorers, taking them around to find areas of interest. She was hired in 1891 to assist Catherine Brandigee in the herbarium at the California Academy of Science, and within a year had been made the joint curator of the herbarium. When Catherine retired in 1894, Alice became the head of botany department at Cal Academy, and it's a position she held until 1949 when she retired. During her entire tenure, the collections at Cal Academy had grown to over 350,000 specimens. That's 3 times the number that she started with after the 1906 fire. So not only are there a number of individual plants named for her, there are 2 genera of plants that were named in her honor. That's Eastwoodia and Alicia. But now, starting the story of the Botanic Garden, you guys typically drop the Blakesley out of her name, but Anna Dorinda Blakesley Bliss was the original donor that funded the start of the garden in memory of her father. And so initially we were founded as the Blakesley Botanic Garden. It was her idea that she wanted to help realize Dr. Frederick Clement's ideas around having a garden that would stretch from the mountains down to the ocean. We didn't make it all the way down to the ocean, but we did do a good start on his concept and idea for an incredible botanic garden here in Santa Barbara. And Anna Dorinda made it possible. And of course, she lived at Casa Dorinda. This was her estate until after she passed away. And then during World War II, you guys may already know that Casa Dorinda served as a rest and recuperation center for the Navy during World War II, and later on became an all-girls school before it became what it is today. One of the other critical people that you have to start with here at the Botanic Garden is Irvana Bissell. Irvana Bissell and her husband Elmer, who is also pictured here, were one of the ones that can be found at the garden every day from about 1926 to 1936. While Elmer was the one to ask Miss Bliss to purchase the land to start the Botanic Garden, it was Irvana at age 66 who directed and actively participated in the planting of many of the first sections of the garden. It was her idea to have a section that was focused exclusively on California Channel Islands because she thought how important and how wonderful those plants were early on before they were really recognized by everybody else. In addition to paying their own gardener to come up and work at the Botanic Garden to help do plantings, they also donated their home to the garden so that when they were done being the directors of the Botanic Garden, we were able to hire our first professional garden director following their tenure there. And that happened in basically 1936. Mildred Barnes Bliss was the daughter of Anna Dorinda Bliss, and she took over the care and feeding of the Botanic Garden after her mother passed away. Mildred never actually lived in Santa Barbara herself. Her home was Dunbarton Oaks outside of Washington, D.C. Mildred hired Beatrix Ferran to transform what was once farmland surrounding her estate into a series of terraced gardens, including lips, rose garden, pool, orangery, and a cutting garden. It was through Mildred's involvement with the Botanic Garden that Beatrix later became involved. After Mildred passed away, she gave Dunbarton Oaks to Harvard University, and it's been an amazing space that still can be visited today. Beatrix Ferran, again, was one of those our founding mothers. She was nationally renowned. She was the one of 11 founding members of the American Society for Landscape Architects and the only woman in that group. She worked for a number of educational institutions, including Harvard, Occidental College, Princeton, Yale, as well as many private gardens and parks all around the country. She was primarily doing most of her work on the East Coast until her husband took a position as the director of the Huntington Library and Botanic Garden down south. And so when they came out to California, she started to do work out here. And that's when Mildred wrapped her into working here at the Botanic Garden. So just a few of some of the projects that she did around the country there. But she's best known, or at least we know her best for her work here at the garden. So she followed closely after Lockwood DeForest for about 5 or 7 years. They worked together. Lockwood had gone to help in the war effort and was mostly down in the LA area. And it was through many letters back and forth that the two of them were able to discuss the designs of the garden. So what I love best about Beatrix was she helped site the library at the Botanic Garden. And it's that view out those doors up through past the Blakesley Boulder and up to the mountain peak. That was one of the things that she really orchestrated. She designed the courtyard in front of the library and was essential in designing our first parking lot and many of the early features at the garden that are still show her stamp today. She worked closely in designing the library with Luda Maria Riggs. Luda grew up here in Santa Barbara. In fact, she went to Santa Barbara City College before she went on to Berkeley to study architecture. She came back and worked with George Washington Smith, eventually becoming a partner in the firm, and then even starting her own firm in 1931. And when it was sort of a natural fit for her to work closely with Beatrix in 1942 to build, design, and site the Blakesley Botanic Garden. And that incredible building is still a centerpiece of the garden today. She went on to be cited in 1960 as a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, as well as the Los Angeles Times named her Woman of the Year in 1967. She continued to practice architecture here in Montecito and through 1980 when she passed away in 1984. Coming back to the garden's employees, our second professional director was Dr. Catherine Muller, and she became our garden director in 1950, starting on staff as originally our director of education in 1948. She really wanted to celebrate California native flora and really make it not just a museum piece, but get it out into the community. And she worked to publish a number of books and really popularize California native plants in our community and getting those planted in and around in parks in other areas. During her tenure as director, garden membership doubled, and we really became the place that we are best known for. When people think fondly back on the Botanic Garden, they're usually remembering the garden as it looked under Dr. Muller. So also during Catherine's time, Dr. Martha Walters was one of our research associates here in plant genetics, going back starting in 1949 and going through 1985. She was one of those critical folks that really brought the science to bear here at the garden. It was interesting to note that at the time, it was much harder for women to get positions at universities. And so botanic gardens became natural refuge for female scientists to really make a name for themselves. And Dr. Walters did that here at the Botanic Garden. Also, it's worth pointing out that we had a number of folks that were incredible volunteers that made the garden what it is today. So Ada Woods was our volunteer librarian and a docent here. She cataloged all of the early board meeting notes, such that made them searchable, which later on, as we realized, as we became a historic organization, it was incredible to go back and find all those references and to be able to do that. She also was incredibly generous and donated her own home to the garden to establish the library endowment that allows us to have a librarian here at the garden full time. Of course, many of you may know Carol Bornstein. She was the garden director of horticulture from 1981 to about 2009. She went on to become the director of the natural gardens at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County. But she really is best known for her many books and incredible classes she taught all over California. She is recently retired, and we're trying to get Carol back to start teaching classes at the garden again. And so many of you may have the opportunity, if you don't already know Carol well, you'll have an opportunity to get to know her in the coming months and years. And of course, we can't leave out Betsy Collins. Betsy only just recently retired as our director of horticulture here. Here you see her both standing back in 1992 in a wildflower field in the Eastern Sierras, as well as from back in 2006 on a plant collecting trip down to Isla Todos Santos off the Baja coast of Mexico. She really was critical because she oversaw the garden restoration after the Hesacita fire. Many of you remember what the garden may have looked like at that time, just in many ways, a burnt husk. And many of those plants had to be brought back to life, replanted. She completed the entire remapping, mapping all the plants that made it through the fire, and then the new accessions that were added to the garden over time. I want to say that part of her claim to fame is not only the meadow restoration, where we took it back to the wildflower meadow that it is today, but also our Island View garden around the Pritzloff Conservation Center was in large part, she selected the plant material for that garden space. And if you've seen it recently, you'll know how beautiful that is. I also want to comment on Sherry Bratt, another one of our research associates here. She was a longtime lichenologist and volunteer. And I want to point out, that's her in this photo, off in the distance, collecting lichens off of a rock in the backcountry of the San Ynez Mountains. She was a critical person to help us begin and build our lichen herbarium. And of course, an herbarium is a space that collects pressed and dried plant material, usually, but a lichen herbarium takes that same approach to lichens. But many of those lichens are growing on rocks, and so you have to carefully chip them off and then collect the entire rock clipping as part of your lichen collection. So Sherry not only knew all the spaces to go for the best lichening, she would actually host lichenologists from around the world here to go into the backcountry and really get to know all that is, all the lichens that are out here. And many of them are named after her. Dr. Shirley Tucker, also one of our longtime research associates, became a research associate here in the late 80s and continued to build our lichen herbarium, building on the work of Sherry Bratt. She brought some of her own herbarium from LSU, but really has continued to expand our collections herself and has really helped us really better curate those collections over time. Most recently, both her recently passed husband, Ken and Shirley, both endowed our first plant systematist here at the garden. And then more recently, Shirley has also endowed the Tucker lichenologist. So we now have 2 fully funded science positions here at the Botanic Garden looking after our incredible botanical collections. Dr. Denise Knapp is our Director of Conservation and Research. She is an ecologist and has really built up our entire science team. It was under her watch that we've added these positions that Shirley funded, and we went from a team of 3 scientists here at the garden to a team of 15 scientists with 7 PhDs among them, working hard across the state to make sure that we can catalog and ensure the long-term success of California's native plants around the state. Her PhD is in ecology from UC Santa Barbara and has worked out on Channel Islands. She worked for, before she came to the garden, she was worked for the Catalina Island Conservancy and has since then done ecology work on all 8 of the Channel Islands for their respective land managers. She's an expert on vegetation and insect interactions, and so does a lot of plant pollinator relationships. Dr. Heather Schneider is our rare plant biologist. Heather oversees the rare plant conservation program, including conducting research, implementing conservation recovery actions, and managing all the conservation seed bank, providing outreach. That's so important because we operate a seed bank here at the garden that functions as Noah's Ark. In case catastrophe strikes in the wild, we are preserving some of California's most rare and endangered plants here in suspended animation, so that if catastrophe were to happen in the wild, if that population, or heaven forbid, the entire species is lost in the wild, we can help put it back. And so that's so critical. And so Heather and her team go all around the state to ensure that we can collect and effectively curate all of those species. Dr. Chrisman Lehmann is now our conservation geneticist here at the garden and has continued many of the studies that have been begun back in the 50s through the 80s. Kristen is also adding many studies. So she's building up a tissue library of a range of California native plants for genetic purposes. She is both a field researcher as well as at home in the genetics lab. You'll see her oftentimes in her white lab coat as she is running, extracting DNA from different plant samples to better understand the species and their distribution across the state. Enrique Nesborg is our Tucker lichenologist here. Dr. Nesborg is our lichenologist. She is actually best known for not only doing lichen sampling on rocks, but also at the top of redwood trees. So she is a climber and is specialized in finding new species that grow only in the tops of redwood trees. And it's surprising how many are up there, but you can imagine that after 1,000 years of life, the redwoods take on an entire community of things that live on them over time. And so she has found a number of new species and continues to do that work while also doing more work here on the Channel Islands for us. And then our most recent hire has been Josie Lesage. Dr. Lesage is another ecologist here and is helping to design restoration projects. Her big one right now is going into the area that burned in the Thomas Fire and helping diagnose areas that need special intervention to help recover better from those fires. She's our applied ecologist here at the garden and is focused on trying to understand how local ecosystems respond to disturbance and restoration. And she's been working with a lot of volunteer hikers that are getting out using iNaturalist and other tools on their phones to help us document the beauty of California, as well as those areas that need a little help and restoration. And as many of you know, Carolyn Kinkade is one of your own at Casa Dorinda. Carolyn was not only remains a active docent here at the garden, but is an alumna trustee. And of course, I know her best because she hired me, but that's hardly her claim to fame. She was a docent for well over 20 years, and along with her recently passed husband, Ed, who many of you know, she was a critical member and remains a critical member. She still serves on our education advisory committee and continues to do an awful lot for the garden here. I can't wait till we can get her back in the garden as a volunteer again. I know that she's got both her vaccines, and now as more of that's coming along, hopefully we'll see her very soon. And again, a lot of what we're really trying to focus on here at the garden is continuing the same sort of trajectory so that we're building tomorrow's leaders, both giving opportunities for young boys and girls to experience the beauty and wonder of California's native plants in a way that they may not be able to experience any other way. Sometimes that's through a microscope, and frequently though, it's also through opportunities where just to play outside and to be part of a natural team. We also have a number of interns and temporary staff that come on to help us with our field work while they're working on their bachelor's or master's degree. And they get opportunities to explore California in ways many of us would never have dreamed before this. And it's been a great way to sort of prime the pipeline to get more and more folks more engaged with California's native plants. We also have our youth and education programs. One of the ones that's been very popular recently has been Nature Nights. We're going to be starting that up again, hopefully this fall. And these are opportunities to visit the garden after dark and to see things in a way that otherwise you never would have had a chance to see them before. We'll put up black lights and look at bugs and moths. We'll understand how plants are sometimes pollinated by bats and other things, and just really engage kids in a way that to see, what's it like to walk in the garden when it's pitch dark. So we'll turn off all the lights and let them try to go for a walk down the redwoods and to understand what that feels like and to listen and what does the garden sound like at night like that. Too often, as we don't have the opportunity to do what many of us did growing up, which was just enjoy nature. And we think that's a critical opportunity for us to offer more of as we go forward. We also have our very popular school tours. These began back in the 1950s under Dr. Catherine Muller, but they continue still today. And every year we serve over 1,600 kids that come to the garden and participate in a tour. But what's become a high point for many of them is the opportunity to participate in a plant lab. This is going in and using some research grade microscopes to look and understand and see so much more about plants than just what meets the naked eye. And so this has been something that they've really come to love, and we get students from all over, really, and teachers really requesting to be able to do more of this kind of engagement and activity. But far from being just about the studies, a big part of what we do here is to give opportunities for kids to play in nature the way that we all did as kids. And so in 2019, we had a program called Garden Casitas, and these were playhouses designed with nature in mind. It was an opportunity for us to get kids playing outside again. We tested a concept that we wanted to see, would kids put down their cell phones and climb a tree, climb a rope, climb on a structure outside? And the answer was yes. In fact, I witnessed some young boys handing their phones to their mother because they needed both hands to be able to climb. Now, they still wanted her to take pictures of them because we've all learned that nothing actually happens unless it's captured on film nowadays. But it is a great opportunity that kids to do something that's novel and innovative to them, which is climb a tree. For us, that wasn't as novel an experience as it is for kids nowadays. So that was a really successful thing. And I can tell you that we're going to be doing more and more of this type of activity to get kids outside and to have a wonderful time in the natural environment more and more as we go forward. I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us on some of our new projects as we continue to work those out. With that, I'm going to stop the slideshow so I can see everyone's faces again and answer any questions that anybody has. So thank you all for your time and attention. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. If anyone has any questions about the garden and some of the incredible women that have made the garden so successful, please ask away. Or I was reminded you can also write questions into the chat if you prefer.
Do you happen to know if Mrs. Brandigee came from the Boston area? Because there are wonderful gardens in Boston belonging to a Brandigee family.
Let me check. I don't recall where she came from. I know she did. It was not from California originally. So she didn't move to San Francisco until 1875. But I don't know exactly where she came from. That's a great question.
I can check it out, I'm sure. Thank you.
It's an unusual name.
Yeah.
She has a plant name, at least one plant. I think it's a sage, isn't it?
Yes.
Salvia Brandigii.
Brandigii.
Yeah.
Well, Carolyn, if I find out the connection, I will let you know. Yeah.
Good, good. It's, you know, it would have been fun to talk about Ava Keedy talking about women, really important women volunteers who started. She was a longtime docent and a wonderful teacher. And she started her career as a nurse and knew Latin because at that time, nurses had to study Latin, again, for botanical reasons, and the importance of plants in medicine, of course. So Ava's was terrific on plant names and terrific with children. She left a wonderful collection of seeds and nuts and bones and all kinds of things when she moved back up north. She was another terrific volunteer. And I was lucky enough to know Ada Woods too. She was a volunteer that was pictured here who left her house to the garden, and which of course the garden sold and endowed the library.
No, it was hard to select a a short list of women to tell the story of the Botanic Garden, because the truth is, this just touches the surface. There are so many more that have been involved over the years that have left their mark on the Botanic Garden. So as you mentioned, Avis Keaty has a sage named after her.
Yes.
The hummingbird sage.
And very often that sage is for sale in our nursery.
Yeah.
So it's the Brandigee. Yes, it's been a great institution for women. And you totally surprised me with that picture of me at the landscape. I was blown away.
Well, it seemed appropriate. Well, I do want to make sure that everyone knows that our website is sbbg.org. And so if you want to learn more about the garden, you can certainly go to our website. But I also want to invite you to come to the garden. We've been open since July again, and even through the last shutdown, we were able to stay open. So please come visit us. We have masks are still required, but it is a safe place to come explore and learn more about the garden and its history. If you go to our website on the at the bottom of the page, you can look at SBBG at home, and there are some wonderful videos and other things about garden history going on there right now. So it's a great place to check out a little bit more. You can also see our webcam, where you can see the Meadow webcam. So you can actually see what the garden looks like at any given time. And believe me, every day the meadow becomes more and more beautiful. So it's a good opportunity to check it out.
So Steve, how do we find I got a newsletter today showing special programs that are going on to celebrate birthday and collections of old pictures and so forth. If we go to sbbg.org, can we?
Yes, you'll see some of those. Some of those are on the website. There's also the video that we did for Seed the Future. That's our history video that's up there. And there are a lot of additional resources. And so we also have I think the photos are up. Becky, are the photos up online as well or not?
Yes, you can go to sbbgphotos.org and search by decade, and you can find every historical photo that we've got in our archives. And it's really just amazing. And if you are able to get out to the garden before the end of this weekend, we've got a pop-up exhibit with some of those photos right now in the garden too.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, we have over 50,000 photos in SBBG Photos right now. And so it is an incredible resource. You can search by individual names. You can search by places, decades, whatever you want. And it's an incredible treasure trove of information about what's been going on at the garden and across the Channel Islands over the last 95 years.
That's one of the exciting things that the garden has specialized in for entire lifetimes of people who work in the garden in the islands now. For example, Nancy Vivrette, another volunteer PhD, has worked her entire professional lifetime, and she's now, well, I don't want to tell secrets about her age, but she's not as old as I am, but she's getting up there. So she's been working in the islands for at least 60 years and seen changes, developments, mostly for the good, which is good for us older people to know about, that changes are taking place that are for the better. And a lot of them, the garden is bringing about.
That's so true, Carolyn. So remember, we had the years when the islands were all so overgrazed. that when they turned into National Park Service lands, there was almost not a plant available other than on the steepest slopes. And it's been a long-term recovery over the last 20, 25 years that the garden's been part of. Actually, it's been longer than that now, I guess now. But the garden's been part of that recovery and has been helping along the way to ensure that we document what's there, that we help bring it back. And it's been amazing to see the shift and changes from the photos of what it looked like right as it became part of the National Park Service or part of the Nature Conservancy, and what it looks like now. So much better. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And I'm happy to answer any more questions, but I want to give everybody a tactful way that you're feel free to, if you're done, to drop off. It won't hurt my feelings. But I want to say thank you again for coming in. And I want to thank Casa Dorinda for hosting us today. We could not have had a chance to do this otherwise. So thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate both the garden's 95th birthday as well as Women's History Month. So thank you all.